Peace, family. Welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Before I get started with today's video, if you're watching on YouTube, please do like, comment, and subscribe, and also hit the notification button. In addition, though, you can also add yourself to my Telegram group. Telegram is a way of getting updates from me, and it's decentralized, so censorship is not an issue. In addition, you can also add yourself to my channel on Odyssey. Odyssey is essentially the same as YouTube. However, censorship is not an issue because it is also decentralized. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard by now of Israel joining the African Union once again. If you have not heard, I'm going to play this video and we're going to just talk through some of the background of this news story.
Well, Israel's foreign ministry has announced the country will be joining the African Union as an observer state. This comes about 2 decades after Israel enjoyed observer status in the then Organization of African Unity until 2002. When the organization dissolved itself and became the African Union. Israel's ambassador to Addis Ababa, Alalain Admesu, submitted the country's charter as an observer member to the 55-member Continental Organization. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid says the development would allow for better cooperation on fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and combating terrorism. Israel has relations with 46 of the 55 AU member states.
After nearly 20 years of diplomatic efforts, Israel has attained observer status at the African Union. Making the move official, the Israeli ambassador to Ethiopia, Chad, and Burundi on Thursday presented his credentials to chairman of the African Union Commission at the bloc's headquarters in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Israel had previously held observer status at the Organization of African Unity, but was long thwarted in its attempts to get it back after the OAU was disbanded in 2002 and replaced by the AU. Much of which was, we can contribute to Muammar Gaddafi, his soul rest in peace, who was actually able to keep Israel from gaining the same status inside of the African Union. Now, many of you, of course, are very much outraged. I think there's a compound of different reasons why people might be outraged. One, we know the history of Israel as it relates to African people. We're going to talk through some of that history to give you just a brief overview, but we know that it's been a very adverse history. And then on top of that, we also seen that this year there was, I think, more than I've seen, there was a lot of outrage against Israel's treatment of Palestinians, particularly because of the internet has been basically a great way of getting information about the actual conditions of what is happening in occupied Palestine. And because of that, people were made more aware of the killings of children, and there was more outrage. And so in light of that, in light of this outrage, in light of people speaking against the apartheid system inside of Israel, it seems very odd that this year of all years, Israel gets re-entered back into the African Union. Now, again, there's a history with Israel and Africa, and that's something that we should all be aware of. I'm going to go through just a little bit of it just so you can understand why this could potentially be a threat to the furtherance of African liberation, and even inside of the realm of as Africa exists today. This is also a way of surveillance, even over the African leaders who are already sold out to Western interests as it stands. Now, this is an article that was on Al Jazeera. Interestingly enough, you're not going to find a lot of other news entities that are willing to criticize Israel other than Al Jazeera. So this is why we're going to be heavily relying on them in this video. It says, Israel's scramble for Africa, selling water, weapons, and lies. For years, Kenya has served as Israel's gateway to Africa. Israel has been using the strong political, economic, and security relations between the two states as a way to expand its influence on the continent and turn other African nations against Palestine. Unfortunately, Israel's strategy seems, at least on the surface, to be succeeding. Africa's historically vocal support for the Palestinian struggle on the international arena is dwindling. The continent's rapprochement with Israel is unfortunate because for decades, Africa has stood as a vanguard against all racist ideologies, including Zionism, the ideology behind Israel's establishment on the ruins of Palestine. If Africa succumbs to Israel's enticement and pressure to fully embrace the Zionist state, the Palestinian people would lose a treasured partner in their struggle for freedom and human rights. Most African countries, like most countries in the global south, have long been voting in favor of pro-Palestinian resolutions at the United Nations General Assembly, further contributing to Israel's sense of isolation on the international stage. As a result, winning back Africa became a modus operandi in Israel international affairs. Winning back because Africa has now always been hostile to Israel and Zionism. Ghana officially recognized Israel in 1956, just 8 years after its inception, and started a trend toward that continued amongst Africans for years to come. By the early 1970s, Israel had established a strong position for itself on the continent. On the eve of the 1973 Israeli-Arab War, Israel had full diplomatic ties with 33 African countries. The October War, however, changed all of that. Back then, Arab countries under Egyptian leadership functioned to some extent with a unified political strategy. One after the other, African countries began severing their ties with Israel. Soon enough, no African state other than Malawi, Lesotho, and Swaziland had official diplomatic relations with Israel. Then the continent's solidarity with Palestine went even further. The Organization of African Unity, the precursor to the African Union, in its 12th ordinary session held in Kampala in 1975, became the first international body to recognize on a large scale the inherent racism in Israel's Zionist ideology by adopting Resolution 77. That resolution was cited in UNGA Resolution 3379, adopted in November of the same year, which determined that Zionism again being the belief that the Jews who left Europe had a right to the land of the Palestinians because of a birthright. They believe that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination. Resolution 3379 remained in effect until it was revoked by the Assembly under intense American pressure in 1991. Now, of course, in the era of neocolonialism, we should know very well that the turn in tide could only be due to some type of economic beneficiaries, particularly from Israel to Africa, and among the African bourgeoisie class, particularly the politicians who consistently sell out the rights of the people to sovereignty in order that they obtain some type of power inside of the political arena. And it says in July of 2016, Benjamin Netanyahu kick-started Israel's scramble for Africa with a historic visit to Kenya, which made him the first Israeli prime minister to visit Africa in the last 50 years. After spending time in Nairobi, where he attended the Israel-Kenya Economic Forum alongside hundreds of Israeli and Kenyan business leaders, he moved on to Uganda, where he met leaders from other African countries, including South Sudan, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. Within the same month, Israel announced its renewal of diplomatic ties between Israel and Guinea. The new Israeli strategy flowed from there. More high-level visits to Africa and triumphant announcements about new joint economic ventures and investments followed. However, diplomatic and economic efforts to win over Africa soon proved insufficient for Israel's prime minister, so he succumbed to rewriting history to improve Israel's standing on the continent. He took place in the Economic Community of West African States, the ECOWAS, held in Liberia, the Liberian capital, in June of 2017. Israel and Africa, they share a natural affinity, he claimed. We have in many ways similar histories. Your nations toiled under foreign rule. You experienced horrific wars and slaughters. This is very much our history. With these words, Netanyahu attempted to cover the ugly face of Zionist colonialism and deceive Africans, but also rob Palestinians of their history. Despite Netanyahu's blatant lies about similar histories, Israel's charm offensive in Africa went from success to success. In January this year, for example, Chad, a Muslim-majority nation in Central Africa's geostrategically most important country, established economic ties with Israel. Now, I'm sure many of you might be taking a position that, okay, sure, Palestine, Israel, horrible situation, but that's not necessarily going to make all African leaders jump on board as far as being against Israel having a place inside of the African continent. Because, hey, what has Israel actually done to Africa? Just in case you're not aware, I'm just going to go through a little bit of that. We all know, obviously, that Israel supported South Africa's apartheid, but there's a more of a history, more one that's tied to U.S. imperialism and Israel being kind of a third wing of that. So it says how Israel has aided Americans' neocolonialism in Africa. In Andrew and Leslie Cockburn's 1991 book about Israeli-American military intelligence relationships called Dangerous Liaison, the important Israeli role in aiding the Central Intelligence Agency-led regime change and coups in Africa is recounted. The author explains how in the 1950s and 1960s, when Africa was freeing itself from the yoke of European colonialism and creating independent states, America wanted to step into the gap and take up where the Europeans had left off. However, the CIA ran into a problem. Africans were rightfully suspicious of U.S. intentions. As one anonymous former CIA official explains in the book, the Soviets had done a very good job of spreading the word that they were just the same as the colonists. Israel's spy agencies, which had been developing a covert relationship with the CIA since the 1950s, were more than willing to help. As Mossad director around the time, Isser Harel explains in his book, we knew very well how to talk to the Black people. The Europeans left Africa and the gate was open for everyone to enter. White people weren't able to get in except for us. We managed it because they didn't expect us to be imperialistic. We were the only ones at the time to have a foothold there. Under a highly classified covert program called KK Mountain, Israeli agents furnished the CIA with intelligence from Africa and the Soviet Union, which it would otherwise have been unable to obtain. In exchange, Israeli spy agencies received a payoff of around 10 to 20 million per year from the agency. At first, some of the newly independent African countries welcomed Israel, but soon this changed after its true role became clear. Israel and the CIA were key to making anti-communist dictators like Uganda's Idi Amin and Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, into their men. It also changed after Israeli identification with white supremacist regime in South Africa became evident. The relationship further deteriorated after the 1973 war between Egypt and Israel, when many African nations broke relations with Israel. In many ways, though, Israel remains the tip of the spear of U.S. imperialism around the world. It continues to try to spread its largesse across Africa, but for whose ultimate benefit? I'm sure you guys must be thinking, oh, wow, a lot has not changed, because just recently it came out in the news that Israel has been assisting the spying different people, and also using African governments to do that. Just if you haven't heard, very quickly, it says that as internet penetration and smartphones usage increases across Africa, digital spaces have become increasingly important in organizing opposition movements. In response, several governments have at times shut down the internet or blocked media apps. We've seen that many times. More recently, however, some regimes have turned to digital surveillance technology for more subtle ways to crush resistance. In a recent report that was entitled Running in Circles, the University of Toronto Citizens Lab, which investigates digital espionage against civil societies, detailed how 25 governments around the world are using tools developed by the Israeli telecoms company Circles. Its technology is sold to nation states only. It intercepts data from 3G networks, allowing the infiltrator to read messages, emails, and listen in on phone calls as they occur. We should know this is happening for us organizers. Using only a telephone number, a Circles platform can also identify the location of a phone anywhere in the world within seconds without a warrant. Circles is affiliated with notorious NSO group whose Pegasus spyware has been widely used to spy on human rights defenders and journalists. And I know this is talking about human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society persons, but not included, because obviously we're always put in the shadows, or the organizers. Know that these things are also being used against organizers, movement builders on the ground. Unlike that technology, however, Circle's tools does not require targets to click on a malicious link. It works by exploiting flaws in signaling system number 7, the protocols that allows networks to exchange calls and text messages between each other. SS7 is predominantly used in 2G and 3G systems, which in 2019 became the leading mobile technology in sub-Saharan Africa, accounting for 45% of all connections. With faster and possibly more secure 4G networks years away from becoming the standard for mobile connectivity in Africa, Circle's technology is ideal for power-hungry African leaders looking to spy on critics. It's, again, more than that, it's also very, very essential for neo-colonial puppets seeking to destabilize movements on the ground. As people try to revolutionize, share content, we have the internet. We all love the internet. We all parade how much we're able to share information. But the other part of that is that this internet could be used as a tracking system of our movements, of our discourse, of our conversations. And we don't even know it, because obviously it's so easy to just use some type of spyware to tap in, and no one will ever even suspect that they are being actively monitored by the imperialist forces. Now, the article goes on to list the various countries that have used this spyware. It lists Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Equatorial Guinea, Morocco, Botswana, Kenya, Zambia. And then they ask the question, should the Israeli government be held responsible? Ultimately, the responsibility for these surveillance technologies lies with the government agencies that pay huge sums of money for them. However, some campaigners argue that Israeli government shoulders some responsibility too for allowing questionable tech firms such as Circles to operate, and by providing them with export licenses. Even more than that, though, let's be real, Israel's not going to provide that technology to any type of revolutionary forces. I mean, that would be very helpful for us, right? If we know that we are able to track what's going on as far as governmental entities that might be adverse to our interests, but they wouldn't do that. They're very strategic, obviously, and who they're going to provide that technology to. So to act like, oh, it's just them making it and, some people picked it up. No, this is to the continuance and the enforcement of the neo-colonial system. And this is how Israel, again, has once again contributed to the spying on African people. And don't also lose sight of the fact that if they're giving this technology to other people, that means they're also using it themselves. There's been a number of times where it has been outed, rarely, it gets to be put out, but it has been outed that Israel has engaged inside of spying of different movements. It's also been shared that Facebook has been giving them information from their platform. It's just so much going on as far as their ability to actually actively monitor movements, even movements that have nothing to do with them, because they want to monitor anti-Semitism is what they say. But it's really about maintaining power and making sure that anything that runs adverse to the interest of Israel or the United States is going to be quickly quelled. Now, the thing about this story is that many of our people were very outraged. Rightfully so, because obviously if you have this type of country that has this history with your people and this present reality of spying and all this present reality of oppression, you don't want to have this person sitting inside of the African Union, even if it's just observer status. And people, if you don't know, observer status isn't full membership status, and that you can't vote, but you can take place in discussions, you can attend different AU meetings, and you can help try to lobby for your interests inside of the AU. Now, do you want that type of person or that type of entity to be inside of the African Union? Well, of course not. But that kind of leads to the bigger issue. For me, at least, I wasn't so outraged at the fact that this is happening as far as Israel actually getting it. I mean, it wasn't outrage at Israel. This is something that they've long coveted. The outrage I always have is with the system that permits these types of things to happen. If we're more consumed with the symptom or with the symptoms of the sickness instead of with the sickness in itself, then we're going to be constantly reacting without strategizing about what the root problem is. The root problem isn't that Israel was given observer status in the African Union. The root problem is that the African Union exists as a body that would allow an adverse entity to welcome them in because now they're saying the right things. And we know obviously this is being motivated by economic interest. Again, neocolonialism, the center is always on economics, and we've been seeing more and more Israel saying that they're investing in Africa. But we should also understand that even more than economic interests, that this is a way to propel European capitalist gain inside of Africa at a time where it's very much under attack. Think about what they said inside of the one article I read. This was used as a means for previously for the United States to have more power inside of the region, even though people would obviously have been adverse to outward American participation inside of Africa. Same thing happening with France. Think about it. If you think about the fact that a lot of Africans are very much apprehensive about French presence inside of their countries, but it's very easy to use other entities who we might not identify as being colonialists because maybe they weren't in existence when colonialism was happening, or maybe they try to relate their story to our story as an anti-colonial struggle, even when it's not true. But because of that, they're able to use certain languages in order to get more acceptance. And this benefits the African bourgeoisie politicians who are sold out our interests because they are looking for excuses to do business with these people and excuses to give these people more leverage inside of the individual country. So this is how this works. You have a country like Israel, and as the African people wake up more and more and become more adverse to Eurocentric presence inside of Africa, you can use backdoor ways and covert ways to actually have the same type of presence inside of Africa and inside of the African Union, inside of this actual example. The system permits that. It's not about Israel. It's about the system that would allow that. The system that is weak, the system that is unable to represent African interests, the system that does not care about our suffering, but it cares more about maintaining the power dynamics as they exist. Now, something I was actually interested to see is that South Africa supposedly says that they had no say, or any African Union member had no say in this happening. So reading from another article from Al Jazeera, as the third one in this video, they said South Africa's government says it was appalled by the African Union's Commission's decision last week to grant Israel observer status at the African bloc. In a statement that was published on Wednesday, the South African government said the unjust and unwarranted move was taken unilaterally without consultations with its members. Israel obtained AU status on Friday after 20 years of diplomatic efforts. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the new status would enable Israel and the AU to forge stronger cooperation in various aspects, including fight against coronavirus and prevention of spread of extreme terrorism. I love that, not love, but it's just so crazy how consistently we see the same themes being utilized to justify imperialist presence inside of Africa. It's always extremism. Israel's going to help with extremism. How is Israel going to help with extremism when they don't, even do that inside of any capacity anywhere? But they're going to, if anything, they invite the Americans in to do those types of things for them. But they're going to help with extremism. And not only are they going to do that, but they're going to now help with the coronavirus. We can see how the coronavirus is now being used as a way to justify imperialist presence, the same way that other things are used. It says, in May, tensions between Israel and Hamas, the group governing Gaza Strip, over the forced expulsion of Palestinian families from their homes in occupied East Jerusalem escalated in an 11-day assault on Gaza. Israeli offensive killed at least 260 people, including 66 children in the besieged enclave, while 13 Israeli people died due to rockets fired by Palestinian groups. Let me say, I've been seeing Israel more and more with African presidents, African leaders. So I don't personally have a strong belief that had the membership of the AU actually been able to vote on it, the actual different leaders actually been able to vote on this, that it would have resulted in a different outcome. I personally believe that they've been working this for a while. We've been seeing them having meetings with president after president. We've been seeing presidents attending their economic forums. I mean, consistently. You've been seeing presidents at APAC back to back to back to back. I mean, it's just been very clear, what the atmosphere is right now. It's okay. We have a new person who wants to come in and throw us some money. So come on. Yeah, let's talk. Let's meet. Let's converse, So I don't have necessarily a sense that they would not have been granted observer status, but it is interesting that South Africa is saying that this was done without any say from the actual African Union leaders. So again, are you more mad that Israel actually has what they wanted, observer status? Are you more mad at the system that would allow that to happen? Also, just think of this as a critique, not just on the African Union, but on the level of African organization. Our people are disorganized. That's always our problem. Until we're able to actually hold people accountable, that's just a reminder that we're always going to be put inside of this position where we're just going to be insulted. This is insulting, obviously. Israel, a country, again, that has done things outwardly against our interests, now being granted observer status in the African Union, is an insult to African people everywhere. But despite that fact, we're unable to do anything about it because everything is disorganized. Let this be a reminder to us of why the urgency of this moment propels us to have to not just organize, but find ways to support others who are already inside of organized formation and try to reach the masses more and more instead of having ourselves being isolated inside of little pockets. Some of us, we get so comfortable with our circles. Some of us, we get so comfortable being over here while all the people are struggling over here. Until we are fully able to engage in what is happening with our people, then this is going to continue. Because I believe that the environment is there. I believe that the atmosphere is there, but it's only a matter of us actually coming together as a people to strategically dismantle this system. So I say this to say, yes, this is an insult. Yes, this is horrible. But this insult happened long before Israel was granted observer status. This insult to me happened whenever there was the capitulation to the Monrovia group instead of the Casablanca group, whenever the Organization of African Unity was forming. And whenever the Monrovia group gained the upper hand against the Casablanca group, what was decided was that the African Union would not be a strong regional bloc, a federation that would move in one swift move and represent all African people. Instead, the African Union, or back then the Organization of African Unity, would be individual African states, still supported by colonial powers, still having outside relationships and outside interests, still fractured by colonial borders and unable to come together in a real, actual, and meaningful way. That was decided a long time ago. This happened a long time ago. It's always been the case. And obviously, this is not the first time that we've seen our people being put inside of this position where we are being insulted by our oppressors, gaining some type of position inside of our systems. Because look at how easy it is for the president of France to go in and out of Africa, despite the fact that France continues to colonize Africa and has a very volatile history of Africa. Think about the history of France whenever their colonies would say, no, we don't want a French friendship anymore. We want to cut off those relations. What did they do? They destroyed every single infrastructure that was ever put by the labors of African people, but put there for the colonial system. They flooded the sewer systems with concrete. That's how inhumane these people were. And yet these people can go in and out of Africa easily. Think about how many coups the CIA was involved in. Think about how many US presidents ordered those coups. Think about how many US presidents have actively taken control and seized, or US administrations have seized the resources of African people or the businessmen inside of the US. Yet how easy is it for those same people who are doing these things to go in and out of Africa? How easy is it for people inside of the UK who actively participated in the genocide against the Kenyans during the Mau Mau rebellion? How easy is it for them to now go in and out of Kenya? So it's not just this is not something new. This is something we've been struggling with. This is something we continue to struggle with. This is a condition that has been present with us. Until we understand that this is not going to be an ongoing, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, but this is going to be a constant perpetuation of the same system doing the same thing, then we're not going to be able to organize against that system. So understanding this is a present reality, I encourage my people who, some of us make it our profession to react rather than to organize, to think strategically, think about the conditions of your people, think about how you can help and aid and join inside of the capacity of joining the African liberation struggle and be united with our people as we fight these types of incursions from imperialist powers. So that's really all I have to say. All articles will be in the description as always. I want to hear your thoughts. Please comment, and I will see you all in the next video. Hey family, this is Tierney Cherie. I'm here to make an announcement that I'm very, very excited to make.
I'm excited because I really think this is something that is important for our people. Otherwise, I would not have devoted so much time and energy towards it. So I finished my first book, and the book title is Fostering False Identity: The Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Now, why is this book something that I think will be very important for our community? Well, number one, it's dealing with the system of white supremacy, particularly the way that the system has targeted our children. If you don't know, our children are literally our future. Without our children, we have no future. And so understand that the system is very crafty when figuring out what to derail first. And to me, it's no mistake that the system particularly went after the Black family. If you look at what happened whenever we were enslaved by this system, and continues to go after the Black family, continues to go after Black children, continues to try to villainize African parents. So for that, I wanted to particularly talk about this subject. Now, the other thing that the book will deal with is our African identities. Why is it that our African identities are a threat to this system? Why is it that whenever we want to identify ourselves as being African, we get so much drawback inside of the Black community? I think a lot of us are not aware of the history of assimilationist thought inside of our community, this idea that we have to be close to white in order to be accepted. And so that's another subject that we delve into in this book. So I'm hoping that anyone who is, obviously, if you're a parent, a Black parent, and you really want to understand why it is that these systems are going after your children, I encourage you to read this book. I hope that it will arm you with a lot of knowledge and a lot of foresight, not just about how to protect your own children, but how to organize in your community, because that's really the purpose of the book, is to say that we have to organize among ourselves in order to protect ourselves from this white supremacist system. And then obviously, if you're an organizer in general, this is something that I think is important for you to read, because like I said, this is a subject in the Black community that we just don't discuss enough. Child welfare is not something that is going to get enough attention. People, obviously, will organize them around other causes, but this is one that is really important that I feel like we have to pay more attention to.